Hey guys, tonight we slip through the shadows of a city that never quite sleeps. You're in 18th century Cairo, just as the muezzins finish their twilight chorus and the day-scorched stones begin to cool. The air is thick with spice and smoke. Your sandals scrape on uneven cobbles, and somewhere in the distance, a donkey protests a late-night delivery. You're not alone. Around you, the city exhales from the heat of the day. The streets stretch like lazy snakes between limestone buildings. Above, colorful linens flap on clotheslines strung from one balcony to another, casting dancing patterns on the walls as lantern light flickers below. The smell of roasting chickpeas wafts through the air. Someone's selling snacks already. You're barely a few steps in when a boy with a tray of glowing coals darts past, followed by an older man humming tunelessly. He balances a brass lantern on his head like it's nothing, his steps practiced and sure. Welcome to the alleys of Cairo after dark, where light comes not from the stars, those are hidden behind layers of city dust, but from fire, oil, and the chatter of people who seem allergic to sleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see how far this little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander toward the smell of something sweet, perhaps dates or honeyed figs, but it turns out to be a vendor selling clove-dusted pastries, stacking them in little pyramids on a cloth laid across the ground. He's not alone. Everywhere you look, someone is setting up shop. A woman spreads a blanket and arranges handmade soaps shaped like camels. A bearded man fans a tiny brazier, offering grilled liver to passersby. You thought night would bring quiet. It brings an entirely different Cairo. The lanterns play tricks on your eyes. At one turn, a narrow alley spills open into a courtyard dotted with woven mats, where people lounge sipping coffee or playing backgammon. At another, you find yourself momentarily blind as you pass through a tunnel, the heat clinging like a second robe. Here's a little reality check. You probably wouldn't survive a week in this Cairo. Your stomach isn't ready, your heat tolerance is suspicious, and frankly, you'd get hopelessly lost the moment someone turned off the lamps. But for now, you're just visiting, a silent observer with unusually clean sandals. This is a city of motion and rhythm. You pass a man leading a train of camels, yes, even at night, each animal stacked with sacks of grain. Their bells jingle with a kind of sleepy dignity. A child darts past you chasing something invisible. Somewhere, a cat yowls and another hisses in reply. You cross a small bridge over a shallow canal, catching the scent of algae and maybe something stronger. The Nile's branches slice through this city, carrying water, fish, and the occasional rumor. Historians still argue whether Cairo's canals were more practical or political in function during this era. But to your nose, they smell mostly of frogs and damp stone. There's something almost dreamlike about how the city moves at night. It doesn't roar, it murmurs. You pass two older women gossiping in Arabic too fast for your ears, one of them pounding garlic with a mortar as she talks. The rhythm of that pestle becomes the background beat to your walk. A scholar in a turban nods as you pass, then immediately stumbles into a donkey. The donkey does not care, neither do you. You reach a crossroad where three different sounds compete: the pluck of an oud, the bubbling hiss of shisha pipes, and the rhythmic clack of hand drums. The sounds don't clash, they braid together. You pause, unsure where to go next. A teenage boy offers you a fig, smiling with more teeth than seems comfortable. You're in a district that technically should be winding down by now. A 1760s edict tried to enforce quiet hours after midnight, but enforcement was about as successful as keeping cats off rooftops. Cairo's night laws are more polite suggestions than rules. Most people are simply too busy, making deals, chasing gossip, or avoiding whoever they owe money to. A group of scholars walks by, heads bowed in discussion. One clutches a leather-bound book. The others sip Kamarul Din from clay cups. That's apricot juice, and yes, it's cold. You wonder if they're debating philosophy or just figuring out where to get the best cock biscuits. One fringe theory, because there's always one, suggests that Cairo's nightlife evolved partly because of widespread insomnia caused by heat and diet. People simply couldn't sleep, so they didn't. Instead, they built a whole culture around not sleeping, and Cairo, being Cairo, turned it into something bustling and beautiful. You duck into a darker alley, more out of curiosity than plan, and immediately regret it. The smell here is stronger, a mix of goats, wet wood, and something you decide not to identify. But just as quickly, it opens into a square with a date palm rising in the center like a lonely sentinel. You sit on the edge of a fountain, one of many left by charitable nobles. The water trickles, warm and slightly metallic. Someone drops a coin into the basin, whispers a prayer, and walks off. The city doesn't demand attention. It receives it like an old friend, shrugging, smirking, and always slightly too busy for small talk. It's getting later, or earlier. Time in Cairo bends at night, like shadows cast by crooked lanterns. You check the sky. It hasn't quite paled yet. The real night still stretches ahead. You follow your nose to the nearest glow of activity and find yourself standing outside a kahwa, one of Cairo's famous late-night coffee houses. Inside, it hums with life. The walls are stained with decades of tobacco smoke, the ceiling low and strung with hanging brass lamps that flicker with candlelight. The air is thick with hookah smoke, spiced with molasses and orange blossom. The scent alone could put you in a trance. You duck under the doorframe, it's shorter than you expect, and step inside. The floor is a patchwork of worn rugs. Wooden stools creak under the weight of men in long galabias and tasseled turbans. One fellow winks at you as he slams down a backgammon piece with theatrical flair. Another laughs too loudly at a joke no one else seems to have heard. This place doesn't serve solitude. You're immediately offered a tiny porcelain cup of Arabic coffee, jet black, strong enough to kick you back into yesterday, and thick with sediment. It's sweet and bitter all at once, like Cairo herself. The server, a wiry man with stained fingers, seems to operate at 5 times the speed of everyone else. He spins between customers, keeping track of orders with nothing but a raised eyebrow and an occasional whistle. Over in the corner, a storyteller sits cross-legged, swaying slightly as he recounts a tale of a cunning merchant who tricked a djinn with nothing but a chicken bone. The audience leans in, rapt. It's hard to tell where the story ends and the improvisation begins. Some of these tales are centuries old, but that doesn't stop the teller from adding his cousin into the plot halfway through. And yes, poets are here too, real ones, not just people who think in rhymes. One man recites a verse about the Nile while using a sugar cube as a metaphor for lost love. Another is furiously scribbling on a scrap of parchment, muttering something about pomegranates and destiny. Historians still argue whether these coffee houses were more like salons or taverns, but you decide they're Cairo's equivalent of the neighborhood group chat, chaotic, funny, occasionally prophetic. A man with unusually arched eyebrows leans toward you and starts recounting a rumor about the governor's nephew being spotted in a dancer's quarters last night. You nod, not because you understand, but because the gesture seems universally accepted as encouragement. His breath smells like cloves. His information smells like mild exaggeration. Suddenly, a hiss of hot coals and the scraping of metal. The hookah attendant is back, replacing the head of someone's shisha with practiced flair. You watch the bubbles rise in the glass base, hear the soft whoosh of someone inhaling. The man blows out a perfect smoke ring and gives you a theatrical bow. You return it, of course. In the back, 2 musicians have set up near a crooked window. One plays the oud, his fingers dancing like fireflies over the strings. The other taps a darbuka in a heartbeat rhythm that makes your foot tap without permission. You didn't come here to dance, but your body considers it anyway. The walls of the coffee house hold layers of conversations, secrets, and gossip like tree rings. They've seen French merchants, Ottoman governors, local clerics, and probably a bored cat or two. You spot one now, slinking across the beams overhead, tail swaying like a metronome. A waiter leans close and quietly asks if you'd like something stronger than coffee. You decline, gently. Date wine isn't illegal exactly, but it's definitely frowned upon. Still, the offer lets you know that behind the respectable surface of storytelling and poetry, these places had depth and shadows. Not all verses here are about flowers. One fringe belief from the time claimed that too much nighttime coffee led to prophetic dreams. You wonder if that's true, or if it's just what someone said when they couldn't sleep and kept seeing gin in their laundry. The coffee house's door swings open again. A man with a falcon on his shoulder enters, looking like he walked out of a fable. No one reacts. That tells you everything you need to know about how strange Cairo's nightlife can get. The falcon blinks at you. You blink back. Outside, the city still murmurs. The heat has cooled to a warm exhale, and the moon casts its pale eye over the tiled roofs. Inside, the air hums with a dozen conversations in a dozen dialects. Some people here are locals. Others are traders from Damascus, pilgrims from Fez, scribes from Istanbul, all gathered in the same little smoke-soaked room. You think about leaving, you really do, but the story is getting good. The merchant is now disguised as a melon vendor, the gin has taken the form of a donkey, and someone just threw a peanut in celebration. So, you stay. Later, when the coffee is gone and the hookahs have cooled, you rise from your stool. Your legs are tingling from sitting too long. You tip the server with a few coins you found in your pocket, possibly imaginary, and step back into the Cairo night. The door creaks shut behind you, muffling the laughter and song within. You've only just begun to scratch the surface of what this city offers after dark. The kahwa fades behind you like a dream half remembered, warm and strange and entirely too real.
You take a right, more by instinct than direction, and the street immediately narrows. Two buildings lean toward each other like they're trading secrets overhead. Lanterns hang on metal hooks, casting loops of yellow light on the stone. You walk through these ovals like stepping through rings of memory. Somewhere behind a shutter, someone's playing a ney flute, its breathy tone curling around you like smoke. As you press forward, you find yourself in one of Cairo's many souks, or markets, that seem to blur the boundary between closed for the night and still open, technically. Here, vendors sleep curled among their goods, a sandal tossed like a pillow, one hand resting protectively on a scale or basket. Others are wide awake, chatting softly or repacking goods by lamplight. You spot a boy scrubbing the innards of a fish stall. The scent is memorable. You pass a stall of perfume bottles glowing in the lamplight, curious, oddly shaped flasks filled with myrrh, rose oil, or something sharper. One bottle is shaped like a pomegranate, its stopper sealed with wax. Another, tall and thin, has "for headaches and heartbreaks" scrawled in Arabic script. A woman notices you looking and offers a dab on your wrist, sandalwood and cinnamon. You smell like an antique bakery now, which is probably an upgrade. Historians still argue whether these night markets were more about commerce or community, but to you, it feels like both. A place where news travels faster than money, where people come to trade fish and fabrics, sure, but also rumors and recipes and the occasional heartfelt complaint about donkeys. You pause at a spice merchant's booth. Cloth sacks overflow with dried hibiscus petals, star anise, cumin, and black limes. He offers you a pinch of something called dukkha, a blend of nuts and spices meant to be eaten with bread. You try it, and your mouth explodes with flavors both familiar and confusing. The man grins, gold tooth catching the lamplight. Near him, another vendor sells tin toys, whirligigs and little birds with moving wings. They're not for children, he explains. They're for men who've forgotten how to sleep. You smile politely and move on. You come across a strange stall selling amulets, against nightmares, thieves, desert storms, even uncomfortable silences. The woman behind the table wears 11 rings and speaks without moving her lips. She offers you one carved with the Eye of Horus. You don't buy it, but you do wonder for the next 10 minutes if you should have.
One oddball detail: there's a rooster sitting calmly on top of a basket of figs. No cage, no rope, just vibes. He watches you pass like he's judging your life choices. Maybe he is. You duck beneath a striped awning, passing a family selling warm bread straight off a flat griddle. The father flips the dough with his hands, his fingers practiced and fearless. The mother sprinkles each round with sesame and presses it into paper with a flourish. Their daughter yawns behind a basket of change, half asleep but still tracking every transaction with hawk-like focus. You buy one. It burns your fingers. It's worth it. A camel trudges past, loaded with rolls of fabric. No rider, just the animal, plodding like it knows exactly where it's going. Someone calls after it. The camel does not care. You pass a stall with cages of pigeons, dozens of them, cooing in a language of their own. Carrier pigeons, the vendor says, for love notes or business deals. He offers to let you write a message. You think about sending a letter to the future. Still awake in Cairo, smell like Dhaka. A rooster stared into my soul. The market twists again and drops you in a wider street, one that feels like it might eventually lead to something recognizable. But you don't follow it. You turn left instead, drawn by the sound of a loom. Tucked between two buildings is a tiny textile workshop, lit by nothing but a single lantern and a bowl of glowing embers. Inside, two young men work at a giant wooden frame, their hands moving in harmony, passing threads back and forth with fluid grace. You watch for a moment, mesmerized by the rhythm, the soft clack and thrum of the loom echoing against the stone walls. One of them glances up and smiles, gesturing you in. You hesitate. He gestures again, more insistently. You duck through the doorway and perch on a stool near the wall. They're weaving what looks like silk, dyed indigo and embroidered with gold thread. The pattern is a mixture of geometry and poetry, squares giving way to calligraphy, which morphs into vines. You ask what it says. The weaver shrugs. Something about patience and soup. He's only half joking. Historians still debate how much of Cairo's textile production during this period was for export versus local use, but one thing is certain: the craftsmanship was renowned across empires. People came here to buy fabric like you'd buy art. Sometimes the fabric was art. The weaver's brother hands you a square of rough cotton printed with a pattern of crescent moons. Take, he says, sleep better with it under your pillow. You don't argue. You thank them and step back into the night, blinking against the shift in light. The market is still alive, but slower now. More yawns, more half-drawn shutters. A cat chases a mouse that is clearly winning. Somewhere a child hums a lullaby to a goat. The air smells of ash and sesame and sleep. You move on, deeper into the labyrinth, the square of mooncloth warm in your hand. You wander past the edge of the market, where the stalls grow scarcer and the cobblestones loosen beneath your feet. The air cools just a little, touched by the Nile's late-night sigh. You catch the scent of mint drifting on the breeze, faint but insistent, and you follow it, because that's what people do in Cairo. You don't chase the story chases you. You turn a corner and stumble into a small courtyard half swallowed by shadows and climbing jasmine. There's a public hammam here, a bathhouse, though from the outside it looks more like an aging palace. Its entrance is a grand wooden arch decorated with faded tiles and the kind of ironwork that makes you think of dragon wings. Inside, the air is wet with heat. You strip off your imaginary cloak, don't ask where you got it, and step into the vestibule. Steam curls around your ankles like a sleepy cat. Someone hands you a cup of sweet mint water. You sip. It's both too hot and exactly right. A round man with arms like bread loaves waves you forward. He's the hammam attendant, and he treats every guest like a mixture of royalty and overgrown toddler. He points to a marble bench. You sit. He points to your shoulders. You shrug. He cracks his knuckles. You regret everything. The scrub is firm, very firm. You suspect he is removing not only layers of skin, but entire past decisions. You might emerge younger or reborn. It's a toss-up. He grunts approvingly, then pours a basin of warm water over your head. It runs down your neck, bringing a strange peace with it. For a moment, there's nothing but the hiss of water, the echo of laughter in the tiled dome above, and the muted heartbeat of the city beyond the walls. Historians still debate whether medieval Cairo's hammams were more religiously inspired acts of purification or just really effective group therapy. Either way, they were part of daily life, sometimes hourly life, if you happen to be particularly dusty or hungover. The bathhouse is mostly men at this hour, traders, scholars, even one particularly bashful baker still smelling faintly of yeast. But you hear that there's a whole separate wing for women, equally grand and even more fun, filled with songs, gossip, and endless orange peels. The architecture here is a marvel. The ceilings are punched with little star-shaped openings to let steam rise and moonlight in. The floor is warm to the touch, heated from below by a small army of fire tenders. The walls glisten with condensation, and the smell is clean, a mix of soap, lemon oil, and the minerals in the stone. Your attendant gestures again, this time for massage. You lie on a slab of smooth stone and he begins. It is not gentle, but it is effective. You lose track of time somewhere between your spine realigning and your soul temporarily exiting your body. You see a vision, a falafel floating in a void. You do not question this. At some point, he hums, a little melody that gets stuck in your head instantly. You'll remember it later and hum it to someone else, who will pass it on again. This is how songs travel. He pats your shoulder with finality, as if saying, "You're done, you've been boiled. Congratulations." You shuffle to a quiet alcove with thick cushions. Someone hands you a towel. Someone else hands you another mint drink, this one cold, mercifully. You sip and recline, head leaning back against ancient stone. Your skin tingles. Your bones feel like softened wax. A scholar nearby is scribbling notes on a damp piece of parchment. You ask what he's writing. "Treatise on humidity and the human spirit," he mutters. You don't question it. This is a city where someone might absolutely be doing that. In another corner, two young men argue about how best to remove henna stains from fingernails. Their debate grows heated, then abruptly ends when one of them sneezes and they both collapse into laughter. You smile. There's a kind of closeness here that only comes when people are scrubbed clean and slightly overheated. One fringe theory claims that the hammam's thick steam actually caused hallucinations, visions mistaken for divine inspiration. That's probably not true, but then again, you did just see a falafel in the void. You linger in the rest area, letting your body dry and your thoughts blur. It's past midnight now, but Cairo doesn't seem to care. Time is more of a concept than a rule here. Eventually, you rise and thank your host with a small bow. He nods once, solemn as a priest. You step back into the night air, and the city wraps around you like a damp shawl. You feel lighter, cleaner, marginally more enlightened. You walk with a slight wobble, partly from the massage, partly from something deeper. Maybe the hammam didn't just clean you. Maybe it unknotted something you didn't know was tangled. The stars are clearer now, pinpricks through Cairo's dusty veil. You pause to look up, and the whole sky seems to inhale with you. In the distance, a rooster crows again. Possibly the same one.
The streets begin to blur into one another now. Alleys that once felt confusing start to feel familiar, like background characters you've passed in the same movie twice. You turn a corner lined with sleeping donkeys and find yourself in front of an ornate wooden door with a brass lion's head knocker and no sign at all. Of course, this is the place. You nudge the door. It creaks open like a reluctant secret, revealing a narrow staircase that spirals upward. The walls are tiled in blue and white patterns that resemble falling feathers. As you ascend, the scent of cardamom and ink grows stronger. At the top, there's a second door, unlocked, and a man with ink-stained fingers waves you in without looking up from his scroll. You've found one of Cairo's famed maktabas, private libraries run by scholars, scribes, and eccentric collectors. This one looks more like a wizard's attic. Scrolls tied with bits of string, ancient leather-bound books, maps etched on silk, and a globe made entirely of wood and mystery. The air hums with the kind of quiet that makes you forget to blink. You step gingerly between teetering towers of texts. A cat is asleep on a pile of Persian poetry. A kettle simmers on a brazier in the corner. Someone offers you a cup of bitter coffee, thick as syrup and tasting of old battles and insomnia. One open book on a desk near the window catches your eye. It's a medical text from Andalusia, complete with diagrams of the human body rendered with more artistic flair than anatomical accuracy. The liver looks like a paisley rug. The brain is wearing what might be a turban. Historians still debate how knowledge was cataloged and shared in these spaces. Some argue the system was highly organized, while others claim it was more of a controlled chaos designed to confuse thieves and impress visitors. You suspect the latter. No one this brilliant files alphabetically. The librarian finally looks up, peers over his glasses, and says, "Looking for anything specific, or just chasing ghosts?" You admit you're just browsing. He seems pleased by that. He beckons you over to a corner table, where a manuscript sits under glass. Poems written by a merchant, he explains, while waiting out a sandstorm. The first line reads, "The desert does not forget your face, even if I try to." The handwriting is uneven. There's a faint wine stain in the bottom corner. You like this merchant. You feel like you've met.
A small boy sits in the opposite corner, reciting passages from memory while his grandfather nods along. He gets one line wrong, something about Alexander the Great, and the old man smacks the table. "That's Macedon, not marzipan!" You grin and move on. Another shelf holds a stack of folded maps, some clearly useful, others less so. One map shows the Nile with a detour into the underworld. Another is labeled "Possible Locations of the Fountain of Excessive Napping." A woman in a black cloak sits scribbling feverishly, her page lit only by a flickering oil lamp. You glance over her shoulder and see that she's composing what appears to be a cookbook, though some of the recipes veer wildly into alchemy. One dish calls for chickpeas, honey, and a single whispered truth. You make a note never to eat that. Somewhere behind a velvet curtain, you hear the scratchy sound of someone reading aloud in Arabic, a bedtime story maybe, or legal theory. In this library, there's barely a difference. One quirky historical detail: some Cairo libraries were known to rent out books overnight to readers for a few coins, with the understanding that the borrower had to return the book before sunrise. People would memorize entire texts in those hours, fueled by sweet coffee and sheer panic. You sit at a window seat and look down at the street below. The lamps are fewer now, the city resting its eyes. You sip the last of your coffee and feel a drowsy kinship with everyone who's ever pulled an all-nighter for reasons they couldn't quite explain. The librarian drapes a thin shawl over your shoulders, you're not sure when he did it, and sets a new book beside you. No title on the spine, just the smell of something old and a bookmark made from a dried fig leaf. You flip it open. The first line reads, "You've wandered far tonight. Time to remember why." And just like that, the world tilts inward. You descend from the library slowly, your fingertips still tingling from centuries-old parchment, your mind pleasantly fogged with a mix of poetry, coffee, and the knowledge that somewhere in Cairo, someone is probably arguing about marzipan again. The night air hits you like a soft shawl, soaked in sandalwood and river mist. Cairo doesn't sleep. Not really.
It just hums more quietly at this hour, like a cat pretending not to be interested in you. You follow the slope of the street, drawn by a new sound. A soft rhythmic tapping, like rain on stone, but far too deliberate. As you round a corner, you spot him, an old man in a heavy wool robe, leaning on a walking stick and tapping gently at the doors of houses one by one. This, dear traveler, is your introduction to the Mesa Harati, Cairo's human alarm clock. His job is simple and ancient, to walk the neighborhood before dawn, waking residents in time for the pre-dawn meal during Ramadan. But in this story, it's not quite Ramadan, and he's still out here, because sometimes tradition outlives the calendar. He doesn't knock harshly, he sings. Soft chants float up into the air, naming names. O Mustafa, wake gently. O Fatima, the sky is beginning to pale. His voice is cracked like dried fruit, but strong enough to curl into alleyways and through wooden shutters. Historians still argue whether the Mesa Harati was a paid role, a religious volunteer gig, or just something elderly men did to justify staying up late. No one's quite sure when the job began. Some say the Abbasid era, others claim it goes back to the Fatimids, or even earlier. It doesn't matter. He walks, he sings, people wake. You fall into step behind him, his cane tapping like a metronome against the sleeping city. A few windows creak open above. Someone yawns. A cat leaps between rooftops like a shadow with opinions. He stops at a particularly large house and produces a small hand drum from under his robe. With 3 gentle taps and a whispered rhyme, he moves on. You think you hear someone giggle inside. He tells you, in a voice just above a whisper, that he has memorized over 200 names in this neighborhood. Some of them haven't lived here in decades. But I still sing for them, he shrugs. The walls remember. You nod as if that makes perfect sense, because here it does. He offers you a piece of flatbread, folded around a smear of date paste and a sprinkle of salt. You eat it slowly, letting the sweetness cut through the lingering bitterness of your library coffee. The bread is still warm. He tells you it was made by the baker on Al-Nahasin Street, the one who can knead dough and gossip at the same time. Somewhere ahead, a rooster begins its 3rd or 4th false alarm of the night. The Mesa Harati chuckles. That one's eager. His wife's probably due any day. You wonder aloud how long he's done this. 43 years, he replies, tapping a door. Except for the year I had the cough. And one other time I overslept. He chuckles. Imagine that. The Mesa Harati needing a Mesa Harati? You walk on, and he tells you stories between stops. Of children who used to run after him with toy drums. Of a woman who once offered him a gold ring if he'd let her sleep just 10 more minutes. He didn't take it, of course. He woke her up anyway. Love is cruel, he says. A fringe historian once theorized that Mesa Haratis were also secret informants, using their nightly rounds to observe neighborhood dynamics and report back to the city's leaders. Most scholars dismiss this, but it does explain the Mesa Haratis' oddly detailed knowledge of everyone's family drama. You pass a small tea shop where a single light still burns. A young man is inside, asleep on the counter, head pillowed on a stack of bills. The Mesa Harati raps on the window once. The man stirs, groans, and raises a lazy thumb in acknowledgement. Ritual complete. Eventually, the old man stops. He leans his weight against the wall, wipes his forehead with a cloth, and watches the sky. It's changing now. The black has begun to recede into navy, and the stars are blinking out one by one like sleepy fireflies. The air is thinner, cooler. You hear a distant rustle of palms by the river, and the unmistakable clink of a teacup against glass somewhere far behind you. The Mesa Harati turns to you and says, "That's enough. The sun will do the rest." He waves once, then vanishes down a side street, his drum tucked under one arm, his cane ticking rhythmically into the pre-dawn hush. You stand there for a long moment, letting the quiet settle in. Something about the Mesa Harati's song is still stuck in your mind. A rhythm older than the houses, older than the names. The sky lightens another shade. A breeze lifts your sleeve, and the call to prayer begins to float out across the rooftops. Cairo, ever awake, yawns softly and stretches toward the day. You find yourself back on the main thoroughfare, just as the city begins to stir again. Lanterns flicker out one by one, their orange glow giving way to the cool gray light of early morning. The night markets are quiet, the vendors asleep behind drawn curtains, but the public hammams, those steam-filled oases of stone and soap, are already rumbling to life. Your feet ache, your shoulders have collected a thin layer of Cairo's night dust. And let's be honest, you smell like someone who fell asleep between a spice merchant and a bookbinder. You wander into a side street where the walls are high and close and where a wooden sign swings gently above a modest door. It reads, Hammam al-Ward, Bathhouse of the Roses. Inside, the change is immediate. The air is warm and damp like exhaled breath. Candles flicker in niches carved into the stone. The sound of dripping water echoes softly across tiled domes. The attendant, a man with a white beard and a towel the size of a sail, hands you a small wooden token and motions for you to undress. You surrender your clothes and your self-consciousness. After all, this is the 14th century. We're all just temporarily bipedal collections of aches and complaints. Modesty exists, but mostly in theory. You're led through a series of warm chambers, each one more humid than the last. The walls are tiled in soothing aquamarines and creams, and steam snakes along the floor like a curious ghost. You finally arrive in the Garm, the hottest room, where light filters in through small glass windows in the domed ceiling, turning the air itself into golden soup. You sit on a warm marble bench and try not to melt. A thin towel clings to your shoulder like a loyal but exhausted companion. There's a basin in front of you, and every now and then an attendant pours warm water over your back, murmuring something that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. One of the other bathers leans over and tells you a rumor. The hammam used to be part of a palace, and the steam tunnels beneath your feet run all the way to the citadel. Historians still argue whether that's true, he says, grinning through a cloud of eucalyptus vapor. But they always argue. It's how they keep warm. The massage begins. You're scrubbed with a loofah that feels like it was woven from gilt and barnacles, and then with another that's slightly more forgiving. Layers of dead skin vanish. Entire regrets are sloughed away. That time you tried to bargain for spices using only interpretive dance, gone. One fringe historian suggests that bathhouses like this one functioned as informal courts, confessionals, and therapy sessions. Here you could complain about your neighbor's goat, ask about someone's cousin's cousin, or quietly inquire how one might poison an in-law with dried apricots, hypothetically of course. A young man next to you is humming something, an old folk song maybe, or a jingle for soap. It's oddly catchy. You hum along. The air thickens, and you find yourself nearly drifting off, your head leaning back against the warm stone. You feel like a grape being slowly transformed into a raisin, and not entirely in a bad way. Eventually, you're led to the cool room, cooler anyway, where you're handed a linen towel and a silver bowl of salab, a warm, creamy drink made from orchid root, milk, and cinnamon. It tastes like the memory of a hug. Your limbs feel both heavier and lighter. Someone combs your hair for you. You do not protest. You would not protest anything right now, unless it involved shoes or decisions. You listen to the soft murmur of conversation. A merchant explaining how camels are moody about temperatures. An elderly woman recalling the best apricots she ever ate. Aleppo, spring of 1356. And two teenagers whispering about someone's cousin who ran away to join a troupe of traveling musicians and now only communicates via riddles. Someone sighs. You sigh in return. One small boy darts through the chamber with a towel on his head like a turban, declaring himself the Sultan of Soap. No one stops him. He has the towel. He has the power. As you stretch out on a warm slab of marble, a woman nearby tells you that her grandmother used to say the hammam was where the soul came back to check on the body. Not to stay, just to visit. to make sure everything was still in roughly the same place. The attendants begin folding towels with quiet precision. You know it's time to leave, though your muscles beg for 5 more minutes, maybe 10, maybe until the next century. You walk out into the early morning sun, skin soft, brain quiet, heart strangely aligned. Your clothes feel too loud, the street too sharp, but the scent of rosewater clings to your skin like an invisible friend. Back in the alley, a baker is pulling flatbreads from a stone oven, and the first of the neighborhood's coffee carts is setting up shop. A donkey blinks at you with the expression of someone who's been to the hammam twice and didn't see the hype. You smile. You smell amazing. You feel like a person who's forgiven themselves just a little bit more.
You wander, still soft from steam and forgiveness, through Cairo's waking streets. Morning is properly here now. The sun crests over rooftops like a sleepy monarch, showing up fashionably late to a court that was already buzzing without it. The scent of baking bread trails you like a parade banner, and you're starting to wonder where exactly breakfast might happen when you hear it. A soft clinking, gentle thuds, the unmistakable chaos of a man with a cart full of glass and ambition. Behold, the fool vendor. His cart is a wheeled monument to simplicity. Wooden frame, bubbling metal pot, precarious stacks of ceramic bowls, and a tin roof to shade his empire of beans. The man himself wears a faded galabeya, a rolled-up scarf for sweat, and the stoic expression of someone who knows he is feeding an entire city one spoonful at a time. Fool, mashed fava beans slowly simmered overnight in enormous copper pots, might be Cairo's most democratic food. Rich or poor, scribe or stonemason, everyone lines up. Because fool isn't just food, it's infrastructure. You approach the cart just as he lifts the lid on the pot. Steam escapes like a ghost telling its side of the story. He ladles the thick, earthy beans into a bowl, then drowns them in olive oil, squeezes half a lemon over it, and tosses in a fistful of chopped parsley. A sprinkle of cumin, maybe a chopped egg if you're lucky. Definitely a side of flatbread so fresh it still thinks it's dough. You sit cross-legged on the nearest step and dig in with your right hand, folding the bread around the beans like it's a letter to your taste buds. It's hot, it's humble, it's perfect. Historians still argue whether fool has its roots in Pharaonic times or whether the modern version took shape under the Abbasids. But frankly, when something tastes this good, who cares? Next to you, a mother feeds her toddler bean mash with practiced flicks of her thumb. The kid protests, she sings, he concedes. It's diplomacy in action. A donkey cart clatters past, bearing a pyramid of green mangoes. Someone on a rooftop shakes out a rug. 2 cats argue over a fish head with the ferocity of philosophers debating metaphysics. Across the alley, a man in a tall hat is selling sesame cakes stacked like gold coins on a tray balanced atop his head. He shouts something that might be poetry or just a particularly vivid menu. You eat slowly, like you're savoring the conclusion to a story that never needed conflict in the first place. Beside the fool cart, the vendor lights a small brazier and brews tea in dented copper kettles. The scent of mint rises, and you feel your bones whisper thank you. He hands you a chipped glass without asking. It's piping hot, sweet as gossip, and strong enough to reboot a camel.
A group of laborers gathers around the cart. Their hands are calloused, their laughter easy. One of them starts describing a dream he had about a talking pigeon who insulted his cooking. Another insists it was probably a jinn. A third, more philosophical, claims the pigeon may have been his cousin in a past life. You sip your tea and nod wisely. A street sweeper walks by, whistling something that sounds suspiciously like a medieval folk tune. You wonder if he knows the Mesaharati from earlier. Probably. Everyone knows everyone here, eventually. Someone leans in and asks you in a conspiratorial tone if you've ever tried fool with dried lemons and garlic sauce. You haven't. Your life apparently has been a lie. You make a mental note. A fringe theory exists, whispered among Cairo's more obsessive food historians, that the Fool Vendor Network once acted as an unofficial courier service. That messages, gossip, and sometimes even secret love notes were smuggled in folded bread or etched lightly onto fig leaves. No proof, of course, but Cairo doesn't require proof, just rhythm. The vendor hands you a second serving without charge. You try to protest, but he waves you off. You have the face of someone who hasn't argued with a bean today, he says. You're not sure what it means, but it feels correct. As you finish your breakfast, someone nearby strikes up a tune on an old stringed instrument, 3 notes, then a fourth that sounds like an apology. It blends with the morning, horses' hooves, merchant cries, a baby's sneeze echoing off stone. The city has fully woken, and somehow so have you. You stretch your limbs and thank the vendor, who nods once, like a general acknowledging a fellow soldier. You leave with your stomach warm, your breath scented faintly of cumin and mint, and your heart doing that quiet little drum roll it sometimes does when you realize life can be small, strange, and exactly enough. The sun is climbing now, higher and hotter. Time to keep moving. But you pause, just for a second, to imagine this same street centuries later, with honking cars and plastic wrappers, and people still arguing over who makes the best fool. The soul of it, you suspect, will still be here, bubbling slowly in a dented pot, waiting.
The morning sun climbs steadily, and you leave the aromas of fool and mint behind, wandering towards a quieter neighborhood where the air carries a hint of the Nile and old stories. This part of Cairo is less chaotic, where cobblestones replace dusty paths, and the call to prayer echoes gently, a distant lullaby to the city's busy rhythm. Here, you find the door to a small courtyard shaded by a grand old fig tree, its branches heavy with leaves rustling softly in the breeze. The courtyard belongs to a medieval scribe's workshop, where manuscripts are carefully crafted, not by magic, but by patience, ink, and the steady hand of artisans who bring words to life. Inside, the scent of parchment and ink mingles with the faint musk of beeswax candles. You watch as a scribe dips his reed pen into a dark inky pool and carefully traces elegant Arabic script onto fine vellum. The letters curve and loop like slow-moving dancers, each stroke deliberate, almost meditative. You lean in closer, mesmerized by the patient rhythm of his work. The scribe hums quietly, a tune passed down from his grandfather, while his fingers smudge just a little, a human flaw making the work all the more precious. It's easy to imagine these manuscripts as treasures, each page a portal to knowledge, poetry, or prayer. Historians still argue whether these workshops were exclusive enclaves for the elite or more open hubs where ideas from all social classes mingled freely. Perhaps both. Maybe that's the beauty of history. It refuses to be pinned down neatly. Nearby, a young apprentice carefully grinds a batch of lapis lazuli into powder, preparing the brilliant blue pigment prized for its brilliance and rarity. The stone's journey from distant mines to this humble courtyard is a tale in itself, a winding path across deserts and mountains carried by caravans, whispered in caravanserais. A quirky detail, some scribes supposedly believed that mixing the blue pigment with honey would improve the ink's flow and possibly grant the manuscript a touch of sweetness in both flavor and fortune. Whether that was practical or poetic remains a question. You catch a glimpse of a hidden note tucked into a manuscript's margin, a playful doodle of a cat chasing a mouse, drawn by a mischievous hand centuries ago. You wonder about the scribe's daydreams, the small rebellions of boredom and whimsy. A visitor from faraway Andalusia arrives, his robes trailing dust, bringing news of new poetic forms and ideas. The exchange of culture in these workshops echoes far beyond Cairo's walls, spreading stories, philosophies, and yes, sometimes even a joke or two about a camel who forgot where he left his hump. As you watch the scribe finish a particularly intricate page,
You feel a strange kinship, not just with him, but with all the countless hands that have labored to preserve human thoughts across time and space. The simple act of writing becomes a bridge, connecting you to voices long silent, yet still whispering. You step outside, the courtyard's cool shade giving way to the bright sunlight of the street. The city hums around you again, full of movement, color, and stories waiting to be told. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you think about that cat chasing a mouse, and smile. The afternoon sun dips lower, casting long, lazy shadows over Cairo's ancient stones. You decide to follow the winding alleys towards the bustling harbor on the Nile, where boats sway gently, creaking in a rhythm as old as the river itself. The air smells of water, fish, and something faintly metallic, the scent of trade and travel. You find yourself beside a small dock where a group of boatmen unload crates covered in faded cloth. The goods inside are mysterious, exotic, fruits with prickly skins, bundles of spices, and delicate silk textiles that shimmer like water in the sunlight. Nearby, an old storyteller, his beard like a cascade of river foam, sits on a wooden crate, weaving tales for a small audience. His voice is soft, but carries the weight of centuries, telling of the silk routes that connected distant empires, bringing not only goods, but ideas, beliefs, and legends. You lean in, captivated, as he describes how these ancient trade routes allowed silk from China to travel thousands of miles, changing hands from merchants to kings, before finally draping the shoulders of Cairo's elite. The journey was perilous, through deserts, mountains, and bandit-infested passes, but silk was worth every risk. Historians still argue whether silk was introduced to Egypt as early as the Ptolemaic period or whether it came later with the Abbasids. But the fact remains, by the medieval era, Cairo was a vibrant hub of global commerce. As you watch, a small boy runs by, balancing a spool of golden thread on his head like a crown. He's clearly proud, perhaps dreaming of becoming a great weaver or merchant one day. A curious fact, some silk threads were rumored to have been mixed with crushed pearls or even powdered precious stones to increase their luster, a technique more myth than confirmed practice, but one that adds a little sparkle to the history of textile art. You notice a woman nearby inspecting a bolt of cloth, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns. She tells you that certain patterns were reserved for nobility, while others signaled specific guilds or professions. Wearing the wrong design could spark confusion or even mild social scandal, a quiet but firm reminder that fashion has always been political. A merchant approaches you with a small pouch of dried rose petals, offering you a fragrant whiff. The scent is calming, almost hypnotic, like a gentle breeze through a flower garden. He mentions that rose water was often sprinkled on silk to freshen it and protect it from moths, blending beauty with practicality. You sit by the water's edge, watching the sun reflect on the Nile like 1,000 flickering stars. Boats with striped sails drift by, their crews singing soft work songs. The city behind you pulses with life, markets, minarets, and the faint sound of a lute being plucked. You feel connected to this ancient river, this ancient city, and the many hands and hearts that have passed through, carrying dreams as delicate and enduring as silk.
The golden light of late afternoon softens as you stroll from the harbor into a quieter part of the city, where narrow streets wind between stone houses with latticed windows and doors painted in faded turquoise. This neighborhood is famous for its medieval apothecaries, places where scents swirl thick and strange, and where remedies might be brewed from the strangest of ingredients. You find yourself drawn to a tiny shop, its wooden sign carved with a mortar and pestle swinging gently in the breeze. Inside, the air is heavy with the mingling aromas of herbs, resins, and something faintly smoky. Glass jars line the shelves, filled with dried rosebuds, crushed frankincense, and bright orange saffron threads. The apothecary himself is a calm man with silver-streaked hair and knowing eyes. He gestures to a mortar piled with powdered myrrh, telling you how ancient Egyptians believed it could soothe not just wounds, but restless souls. Perhaps a handy cure for the kind of insomnia that keeps you staring at the ceiling. Historians still argue whether the medical knowledge here was purely local or if it blended in significant ways with Greek, Persian, and Indian traditions. But what's clear is that this little shop was a nexus of healing ideas. He offers you a cup of herbal tea, a fragrant blend of chamomile and mint, sweetened lightly with date syrup. The warmth spreads slowly down your throat, the perfect invitation to settle in and listen. Behind the counter, an ancient manuscript is spread open. You catch a glimpse of a curious remedy, a paste made from crocodile dung, believed by some to act as a sunscreen or antibacterial agent. The thought alone makes you chuckle quietly, wondering if ancient skincare was truly ahead of its time or just delightfully strange. The apothecary hums a tune you recognize from earlier, some kind of ancient lullaby that floats through the air like a protective charm. A customer nearby is trying to decide between a salve for stomach aches and one for bad dreams. You don't ask which they pick. Outside, a cat lounges lazily on the windowsill, blinking slowly in the afternoon sun. Some say cats were revered as guardians against evil spirits. Others think they just appreciated a good nap spot. Probably both. A visitor bursts into the shop, breathless with news of a new plague spreading in distant lands. The apothecary listens quietly, then notes that sometimes the best cure is calm and a good night's sleep. You take a deep breath, savoring the mingled scents and stories, feeling a soothing quietness settle over you. The city pulses softly beyond the door, but inside, time seems to fold gently, like the pages of a well-loved book. You thank the apothecary and step back into the street, the tea's warmth lingering, a small comfort as dusk begins to gather. As dusk deepens, you find yourself wandering toward the outskirts of the city, where the noise fades and the air cools with the promise of night. Here lies a quiet neighborhood known for its traditional hammams, public bathhouses that are less about hygiene and more about ritual, relaxation, and a gentle kind of socializing that seems to have slowed time itself. You step through the heavy wooden doors into a cool marble room where steam drifts like soft clouds caught in slow motion. The scent of eucalyptus and rosewater fills the air, wrapping around you like a cozy blanket. In one corner, a bath attendant moves with practiced grace, gently scrubbing a client with a coarse mitt, an ancient technique believed to exfoliate not just the skin, but worries and restless thoughts. The attendant hums a tune you half recognize, the same melody that echoed earlier from the apothecary's shop. Cairo must have a surprisingly limited playlist, you think, with a smile. You settle on a low bench, feeling the heat seep into your muscles and the warmth coaxing your body into a slow, gentle rhythm. Around you, patrons lounge on stone benches, some chatting quietly about daily life, others lost in contemplative silence. Historians still argue whether hammams originated purely from Roman thermae or if local Egyptian practices deeply influenced their design and social function. But either way, they have been central to community life for centuries. A curious tidbit, in medieval times, hammams were also places where news was exchanged, marriages arranged, and even poets recited verses to an audience clad only in steam and towels, a kind of ancient open mic with a very intimate setting. You close your eyes briefly, letting the sound of dripping water and distant laughter lull you further into relaxation. Nearby, someone quietly sips on a cup of carcadet, a deep red hibiscus tea known for its tartness and soothing qualities.
A gentle debate still simmers among scholars over whether Karkaday's popularity in Egypt stems from African or Middle Eastern traditions, but here it's simply a comforting companion to the evening. You imagine yourself drifting down the Nile, steam curling from the water like ancient spirits rising. The city outside the hammam continues its restless hum, but inside, the world is quiet, slow, and safe. As you prepare to leave, a soft breeze carries the faint sound of a lute and distant prayer calls. You step back into the twilight, feeling lighter, softer, as if the day's weight has melted away in the steam. Your skin still tingles from the scrub, your mind gently drifting, ready to slip into dreams as smooth as silk. Night deepens, and you find yourself wandering toward the grand marketplace, now quieter, the stalls closed and lanterns flickering gently in the breeze. This is the place where stories of the day mingle with legends of the past, the birthplace of many a whispered secret or soft-spoken rumor in the gentle hum of nighttime Cairo. You pause by an old wooden cart piled high with dates and figs, the sweet, sticky aroma drawing you closer. Nearby, a street vendor packs away his copper pots, his hands stained with the faintest hint of turmeric and saffron from the day's cooking. You settle near the fountain, where water trickles in a soothing, hypnotic rhythm. Here, in the shadows, you recall tales of the Mamluk era, a time when the streets bustled not just with merchants, but with knights, poets, and scholars. The Mamluks, you learn, were a unique class, once slaves, now rulers, who brought an intriguing mix of cultures to Cairo. Their rule was marked by impressive architecture, strict laws, and curious customs, such as the strict prohibition against common folk wearing certain colors or styles, a way to maintain social order with a dash of fashion policing. Historians still argue how much power the Mamluks really wielded beneath their elaborate robes. Some say they were puppets of larger empires. Others believe they shaped history with their sharp swords and sharper minds. A quirky fact, Mamluk soldiers were said to have a favorite way of unwinding after battle, playing a game that involved tossing dates into a pot from a distance, a sort of medieval darts with fruit. It was said to test both skill and patience, essential for any warrior who also needed a bit of fun. You watch as a street cat darts across the cobblestones, its sleek form barely visible in the lantern light. Cats, as you remember from earlier, were cherished companions here, sometimes believed to ward off misfortune. Nearby, a scholar unwraps a scroll and begins reading softly, reciting poetry that floats on the night air like a lullaby. The words tell of love, honor, and the simple pleasures of a city that never quite sleeps. You take a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill your lungs. The marketplace, once a place of hustle and clamor, now feels like a quiet heartbeat beneath the city's pulse. Slowly, you rise, knowing the path home will be lit by stars and the gentle glow of lanterns, just enough light to guide you softly to rest.
The night deepens further as you leave the marketplace behind and meander toward a quieter part of the city where the glow from oil lamps casts gentle pools of amber light on the narrow streets. Here, the hum of daily life fades into whispers, and the scent of jasmine and myrrh fills the cool air. You find yourself in front of a modest house where the soft sounds of conversation drift through open windows. This is a glimpse into the evening routines of a medieval Egyptian family, a world away from the bustle of markets and bathhouses. Inside, a mother stirs a pot of lentil stew, the aroma warm and familiar. Children sit cross-legged on woven mats, listening intently as their grandfather recounts tales of old, a mix of history, legend, and gentle humor. His voice lowers as he describes the peculiar punishments once meted out in local courts, nothing harsh, but enough to encourage better behavior, like requiring a mischief maker to wear a brightly colored hat for a day, or recite a poem of apology. Historians still argue how common these punishments really were versus how much they were exaggerated in stories meant to entertain or teach. Either way, it's clear that discipline was delivered with a light touch, more about restoring harmony than instilling fear. The family's cat curls up by the fire, its soft purring blending with the rhythmic tapping of wooden spoons. The mother shares a curious fact that some families believed burning a mixture of herbs like rue and lavender in the hearth could ward off nightmares and promote peaceful sleep. Whether science backs this or not, the ritual itself feels comforting enough. Outside, the sounds of the city lull you, a distant lute, a soft prayer call, the gentle rustle of palm leaves in the night breeze. You feel wrapped in the warmth of simple, endearing traditions. You imagine lying down on a mat of woven reeds, the cool night air brushing your skin, the scent of stew lingering in your nose, and the echoes of stories drifting softly in your ears. Sleep feels near now, a gentle friend waiting just beyond the quiet. The city now rests beneath a velvety sky sprinkled with stars, and you wander toward the banks of the Nile one last time. The river flows quietly, a dark ribbon reflecting the soft moonlight, carrying with it the whispers of centuries. You settle on a smooth stone at the water's edge, feeling the cool night breeze kiss your face and hearing the gentle lap of water against the shore. Here, under the vastness of the sky, you reflect on the day's journey, through markets, bathhouses, apothecaries, and family hearths, and the stories that weave this city's ancient soul. You remember the silk threads shimmering in the sunlight, the scent of herbal tea mingling with the quiet murmur of conversation, the gentle warmth of a hammam steam, and the soft laughter echoing from the marketplace. Each moment is a brushstroke painting the rich tapestry of a world both foreign and familiar, slow-moving yet alive. Historians still debate many details, the origins of certain customs, the precise influence of far-flung empires, the true nature of some remedies. But the human heart beneath it all beats with the same steady rhythm, craving comfort, connection, and rest. You close your eyes briefly, listening to the river's soft song, feeling the steady pulse of time beneath your skin. It is a melody older than kings, gentler than any lullaby you know, promising peace. As the night deepens, you let your thoughts drift like the river itself, flowing softly into sleep's embrace, calm and untroubled. Tomorrow is another day, but for now there is only this moment, quiet, slow, and filled with gentle stories carried on the breeze. Now, as your breathing slows and your mind begins to float on the edge of dreams, imagine yourself lying beside that gentle river, the water whispering lullabies just for you. The stars above twinkle softly, their light cool and steady, watching over you like ancient guardians. There is no hurry here, no urgency, only the slow, steady pulse of a world at rest. Your thoughts become lighter, drifting like petals on a calm stream, each one fading gently into the soft night air. Remember the warm scents, the soft sounds, the peaceful faces you encountered today. Let those memories wrap around you like a comforting shawl, easing away any lingering tension or worry. You are safe, you are calm, and as your eyes close, may the gentle history of this ancient city soothe you into a deep, restful sleep. Sweet dreams, friend.